And we're going to take this off since I can't really talk very well with it. So welcome everyone to a casual stroll through Gundabad. So we had a little bit of a change in setting compared to previous ones since we had a nor'easter roll through and I don't have power at home. So this is actually the first time that I have been in the office for any substantial amount of time in a little over a year and a half. So this is new and exciting. So welcome everyone to Casual Stroll. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Matt Elliott. I'm a senior world designer here on Lord of the Rings Online. Been doing this for a very long time, and we're very excited to be showing off and talking a little bit about Gundabad today. Like all of our other previous Casual Strolls, this is purely a world and level design focused stream, so I'm not going to be answering any questions about class balance, about the brawler itself, legendary items, PvMP, anything about that. However, if you have questions about the landscape, the world, the stuff that goes into building it, hit me with them. As usual too, I have a tendency to forget to drink, so I conveniently have a couple of seltzers. So if you haven't seen me take a drink in a while, please remind me so that my voice does not just absolutely die on me. So with that in mind, we'll do a quick look at chat, and then we will start our way through Gundabad. So yes, the nor'easter threw things off. I do apologize for the HVAC that's going on. This is kind of an ad hoc situation, not our usual streaming location. And the stream room was not quite in a state for me to be able to get in there and use that. So you will hear a little bit of background noise. I wish I could do something about that. I'm sorry I'm not able to. The beard was not CDC or OSHA approved, but we do have our COVID protocols in place here, and actually right now I am the only person in the office. Our IT folk just left a little while ago as well. Yeah, I think everyone is being safe, and we are just hunkering down and waiting for this storm to wrap up. You know, we're going to go a little bit longer for this stream than we usually do because there's a lot of ground to cover, and I know last time, even with Arid Lewin, people were like, you're not going to get through it all in the 1 hour. So we're pushing this a little bit further. We may go an hour and a half, we may go 2 hours. It all depends on how quickly we get through things and if there are any other stops and pauses along the way to talk a little bit more in depth about things. So one of the questions that I saw kind of early on was what was one of my favorite areas in working in Gundabad. Let me see if I can find it real quick. So which area of Gundabad, for Minstrel by Night, which area of Gundabad did you enjoy working on the most? So I've been working on Gundabad for just about a year now, a little bit longer than that. I was principal world designer for Madakard, Deepsgrave, and Carbronach. Carbronach is probably my favorite area, in large part because it's one of the first areas that we kind of re-implemented an older, or a new to us, method of developing the landscape, which I'll talk about a bit when we actually get there. And yeah, so one of the things to talk about right now is we are entering into Madakard. So this is the view that you will get upon entering Gundabad from Elderslade. After you've completed a portion of the epic story, you're able to get in through the door there, and you're greeted to this main hall. There will be a point at some point where I'll probably need to jump off my Thunderboar and cloak and run around because things will be a little bit too aggro on me and I won't be able to stay up on the mount all that long. But so the idea with this hub here is intended to be kind of the introductory space for Gundabad, and you'll be able to, from here, kind of get a good vantage point of some of the major POIs in Madakard, at least. And I think there's even a quest in here that kind of tells you to go to the different sections of this lookout and view the different points of interest. I mean, one of my favorite points of interest is this hive up over here, which we'll get to. So one of the things too that I think we were really excited about and we're working diligently to help improve upon is Gundabad is a considerably more dense space structurally than Moria was. We're trying to build towards a more modern look and feel and modern aesthetic, which requires a little bit of a heavier effort in terms of world building. And that comes with performance cost. So right now we're kind of in our performance management stage where we're going through and we're doing what we can to improve frame rate and to improve performance in general, both on the server and on the client. One of the big things that we were really excited to play about in Gundabad was kind of take the next step from Moria, and Moria I think did a good job of expansive caves, and we really wanted to sell like the verticality of a city in this space. And I think in Gundabad we've done a pretty effective job of that. There's a lot of verticality in many of our areas that helps to sell a like taller, deeper, darker space. So there's a number of people that have commented on just how, like, it blows their minds how big Gundabad is. And I think some of it is us playing with that verticality and kind of going with a layered approach to how we do our content space. Like, not layered as an instance, but like levels on top of levels on top of levels. It was one of the things that we wanted to do to try to make it feel like bigger and more lived in. This was a fun area to build because we don't have a ton of, basically assets to work with for the hill beasts, or the cave beasts in this case. We don't have a lot of assets to work with in this space. So we had to kind of hodgepodge it a little bit using bone piles and other bits of debris. All right, I'm going to there. All right, so since things are aggroing on me way more than I thought they would, we're gonna hoof it at super brawler speed. I did decide to take a break from the scenario character and break out a new character for specifically for this stream called Gramlock. I was feeling a little Transformers Dino Body when I was making him. So Guaranda says Matagard looks like Moria on steroids. Yeah, it's certainly we're trying to push it. I think total like physical space, if you were to walk from point A to point B, Moria probably has Gundabad beat on expansiveness, but I think Gundabad does more with density. Density above levels, below levels. We didn't play with a lot of that in Moria itself. There were a few spots where we played with that, kind of building exterior, making buildings that you could go into and go up in different levels on, but not to the degree that we did here in Gundabad. Though, so I do think I need to that, and we'll get the full effect of this space. So for context, let's see, where were we? We came in up over there, right across where you can see the light shafts coming down. So now we're over here, and we're in one of my favorite places in the interior of Gundabad is this Grodbog hive that we got some great new assets to build with and to make just this this kind of terrifying interior space infested with the Grotbog. So Dan TL says, I'm hoping there are not client performance problems like there are in areas like Minas Tirith. So it's one of the things that we are working towards mitigating as much as we can. There have been, I think our first round of bull roar feedback was really, really good as far as performance goes, and helped us find some issues, some culprits with how our game engine renders certain things, and tackle those and start addressing them. So I think the hope is that through some of those changes we'll be able to better improve performance in the space, and also potentially even kind of look back at other areas we've built before and make adjustments to the assets used in those areas to help overall improve performance. There were certainly some things that we discovered that we were kind of surprised to have discovered, because we kind of looked at it and we're like, well, these properties shouldn't be on these assets, and then from there we were able to kind of take those assets, clean them up a little bit, and hopefully improve performance. I know, like, working with an engineer, we had one engineer who's been like very dedicated to helping us figure out performance stuff, and we made some changes here in Madagard and in Deepsgrave that once they went in and he started like looking at them, he was like, yeah, these little changes really helped as far as the engine goes. Turn off the UI again. So we'll do a quick look at questions again to see if there's anything else. So yes, Benny Hill mode activated. My boar could only go so fast. Who came up with the idea of Cloven Gap? That area is mesmerizing. Well, we'll talk a little bit more about Cloven Gap when we get to it. A lot of our areas, particularly the more natural-looking areas, do have a foundation in real-world geography that we kind of like are inspired by and work towards like building something that's reminiscent of those things. So yeah, Drearspire says, horribly amusing when Sev said last week that there were no flying mounts, and then some goblins have them. Well, goblins, they're special. They can tame the bats, but things like eagles are proud and sentient beings that really don't like carrying along people, and they only do so in the most dire of circumstances, where the need is greatest. And the couple of places where we've introduced the eagle travel points, those are likely to be the extent of the kind of flight travel that we'll have here in Middle Earth, or at least in Lotro, in large part because of lore, and in considerable part because of the additional cost of landscape development that would be incurred should those changes happen. All right, so there are some little bugs here that I'm going to remember to fix. I'll have to follow up on that and see what changes were made. So we're working our way from the western side of Madagard all the way up and around to the steep set, which is kind of the main hub for all of Gundabad. It will be pretty readily accessible by anyone, particularly anyone that has access to or made it through to any of the mission travel vendors. As far as okay, so this is me as I'm running around noticing something where I'm just like, this issue seems consistent, which makes me wonder if an asset was reprocessed and its origin point was moved slightly, because I don't remember any of these places being problematic before. So I'll have to I'll talk with our art team and our tech art team about that later this week, so we can see if we can figure out what the issue is. So as we come here, this is the steep set. Now there are a number of instances and quests that take place out of the steep set. many of them associated with the Legacy of Durin questline. Um, and dwarves be dwarven with their impressive thrones. And then you also get this grand view out over Madagard. And for those wondering, yes, if you jump down into that pit, you will be defeated. Alright, so we will go through there. So there were a few comments about that Grodbog hive, particularly one saying that a wall and floor texture are needed for that, and I think that's something that we can probably accomplish at some point in the near future. As soon as I have some breathing room and once I'm done with my next project. So Minstrel by Night says, I remember me talking about the tech applied in Azanul Bazaar to generate all the bodies and fighting orc groups. I think that does help performance a lot. I hope at some point you guys can apply that to assets in Pelennor and Minas Tirith. Certainly something that we can look at and discuss. I think there's some early versions of that in those spaces already, but there may need to be a more diligent look at those kinds of consolidations. Bel Navar says, when you say little changes, can you give us an example? So the way our engine renders things, the engine and the server looks at every single thing placed in the scene, and there are a couple of types of items that are considered unique and considered shared. And unique items are ones that the server is like, anytime it sees a unique one, it wants to like account for it. Whereas if it's shared, it's like, oh, well, it's every one of this kind of item, and it shares it. And it's less processing load because it only needs to load it once, because the idea is that properties are shared. So we had a lot of building structures from the old Moria set that were being considered unique, which would mean that the server, for every single instance of those things, would like remember it, take note of it. Whereas shared ones, it would just be like, oh, there's 10 of that building. Well, I'll just note the number of them that there is, but I don't need to know too much more than that sort of thing. So right now we are in the new Allegiance Hall for the Fate of Gundabad expansion pack. Again, going vertical as opposed to wide, like the Hall Under the Mountain did. But the idea being with this space is it can act as the major social, anchor for the expansion pack. With the intent that you'll be coming out here to visit quite frequently, and we wanted to make sure that because of that, you were treated to a really nice looking space. It may not be as grand and maybe brilliant isn't the right word, but it may not be as grand as the Hall Under the Mountain, but hopefully it's suitable and it's something that has enough of the features that you're looking for in a social space that players will want to be able to use it. And I believe I set it up so you can use your mounts in here. For those of you that want to farm, you have the opportunity to farm over here. All right, let's see. Go down through this a little bit more. The banners back yonder were surprisingly plain, no symbol on them. We have what we've been calling a banner pass, and I still need to do a banner pass in some of the areas that I've been working on. But there is a considerable amount of heraldry that was created as part of this as well, for all the different dwarf houses, and as well as factions for enemies. I think even like Angmar, the Angmarim have a new banner to go by as well. So I need a drink. Belrialan says, just a thought from my tired mind, a casual stroll through Gundabad has become a fast speed walk through Gundabad. Well, and if we want to get through it within the time that I have, we gotta power walk just a little bit. So one of the things too that I was excited about, and unfortunately I don't think these guys are, these dwarves are doing such a great job of it, was having, and they may need to be up leveled to 140 to deal with this, was having the guards that defended various holdings and whatnot. It was one of the things that I always kind of liked playing through lower level areas where you just had the occasional wolf that would like wander too close to town and just get run over by, you know, the town archer and whatnot. And I like the idea of that in here, where it makes the environment feel a little bit more active and a little bit more alive. So we'll head back up. We'll hit the last quest hub here, and then we'll head over to Deepsgrave. Probably should have gone the other route. Deepsgrave has, I think, one of my most fun accidental discoveries while I was doing the work in it and was setting up the rail system in there, which I didn't see too much talk about, so I don't know if it's either working, if it's not working, or players just didn't happen to run across it. Alright, I'm gonna shortcut us. And Chromite mentioned me running past a Z-fighting bug in the Allegiance Hall, and I did notice it. I made a mental note of it. It's one of the joys and thrills of doing these kinds of streams, is running across things that are bugs and trying not to let it derail me too much, unless it's particularly egregious, like things like the staircases that I was observing was. So Geraldo asks if there's another bull roar test being planned, and I believe there's one happening soon, if not today, maybe tomorrow. Don't quote me on that. I would say take a look at the boards and take a look at social media and see if there's been any announcement of it. I know there is an intent to do another one. As to the timing for when, I could not say specifically, particularly today, because I've been kind of scrambling to get this set up for everyone. So during beta, some of Gundabad's interior regions had huge frame rate drops, like Durn's Awakening place. Yep, and I think that's another big area that had some work done on it. I know a lot of the assets there were not degrading in the way that they should have. So hopefully that fixes or helps address some of those issues. So as Drearspire mentioned, yes, Bull Roarer is back up. I am competing with attention for Bull Roarer right now. Zamel says the HVAC kind of adds ambience to this tour. You can just imagine that I'm in a big cave with lots of wind blowing through it right now. So Drearspire says, wait, rails. So yes, one of the learnings from building Moria is that we can't entirely trust our mount system, our stable master system, to stay where we tell it to stay. And considering the focus on verticality that Gundabad has, it was felt necessary to make it a little bit harder for your goat to just go sailing off into the wild depths of the interiors. So Ivanar says some of the mobs in the recent areas have upgraded aggro settings. They will attack each other if they randomly wander too close together in landscape. The various saber cats are especially aggressive, and that's another thing that I'd love to see us do more of. Though that does sometimes have its own performance costs too. That kind of constant fighting amongst everything can lead to servers having to work a little bit more to keep up with everything. So Edith Aldora says, speaking of accidental discoveries, I found a wormhole underneath Miss Morgul that leads directly to Archit. If there are any places like that you get into undiscovered territories, please by all means bug them so that we can put in fixes to help mitigate those issues. So the Berg Beam was like a lot of fun to develop because it's just basically this spiral going up this massive column of rock. And one of the things that I loved about it is we got I may say that I loved making Carbernock, but the Deepsgrave area got the most use out of one of my favorite new assets in the new staircases that we got, because that allows us to build stacked spiral staircases for the first time in ever. We've always kind of had these block stairs that made it a little hard to make spirals out of, and these new stair pieces just they're amazing. I can't gush enough about them. All right, so we're taking a quick trip down to the floor level. One of the things that's on my to-do list here is to honestly add more trash fires. There need to be more trash fires here. I need to dirty up the terrain a little bit more, get some of this stuff going in here, so that's a small polish thing left for me. But I really, really do like how just vertical this space is. It's kind of dizzying. And we'll go to middle tier. And because of the verticality in this space, one of the things that I wanted to make sure was available was a way for players to kind of get through the different levels a little bit more easily. So we have, in the center here, we have this lift system that will take you from the very, very bottom all the way up to the very, very top. So Cormai asks, how do we fix Z-fighting issues, and can I explain that? So Z-fighting occurs, for those that are unfamiliar, when two surfaces are on the exact same plane, and it's not necessarily always Z, but it's more often seen on flat planes. So when you have two floor pieces put up against each other, or you have like this, for example, where you have two columns that are kind of right next to each other, and they're overlapping, and they're kind of fighting for who gets to render. So there's that, they're like, no me, and that's why you see that flickering when you run by, because your client is trying to figure out which it should show first. We have a few different techniques to fixing these problems, One was a piece of tech, and the other was just the good old like hand way. The hand way that we used to do it, way back in the launch from the launch of the game, was we would just physically adjust the position of one of those two assets very, very slightly in order to make sure that they weren't like occupying the same space. We did get a piece of tech at some point though that allowed us to kind of assign an order to different things so that we could tell the assets which has priority for rendering. And that's what our usual first stab at it is doing that. Is we'll just adjust. We'll say, okay, your sort order 1, your sort order 4, and 1 will render before 4, that sort of thing. And that's really helped us kind of make a more complex space. So this is my favorite discovery, is just how far, oh hey, there's a fence, I'll have to fix that. How far you fall. And then pancake at the bottom. Are there any plans in the future to make it easier for new people to get into the game? My friends are having a hard time getting in the game as there's so many systems, zones, and so on. So Obi, if you're talking in terms of like helping them play through the content or helping them reach cap, I think any suggestion I would have for people that might find the sheer amount of content being a bit daunting, I would always say like focus in on the epic story, the main storyline, and then follow that through, and that will kind of help you focus and help the new players focus. And then, as Drearspire mentioned, also the free point code right now can help unlock so many different things for those players as well. Scrolling down a few more questions. I was not, so Yao asks if I was the one that set up the Adventures of Floyd and DeWitt deeds, and will we see more of them in the future? So I did not set up Floyd and DeWitt. I think those were part of a Moria revamp at one point. Those when they were introduced. I don't believe I was on the project at that point. I think I was doing other things for Turbine, or was off on my doing my other project management stuff outside of the game industry. So I'm not sure who set them up, and as far as whether or not we'll see more of them, I couldn't say specifically. I'm not sure. Your best bet would probably be to ask on the message boards and see if you can get one of our designers excited about bringing more of them in. So Ending asks, do you know how quest design will be here? Will we be going up and down a lot? I am not familiar with the quest design here. I will be starting a playthrough on this space soon with feedback, so I couldn't say specifically how the designs for this space are as far as how players are vectored through the area. Again, this is more of a world-focused stream than a content-focused stream, so. Oh. Need to fix that too. So one of the things that was fun about this space is, well, also building a fantastically impressive landscape experience. There's a lot of little dungeons throughout everything here, between little dungeons here and there, like this one that I'm just in right now, all the way through to all of the mission spaces, which we'll take a look at some of those as time allows. So let's go down through for a few more questions and comments. Let's see. Rowan of Gondor says this is so much more open than Moria, liking the feel of it. So I think we tried to provide some variety, and I think one of the problems that we hit with Moria was a fatigue where there was a good amount of darkness and claustrophobia that kind of was off-putting to players after they had been in it for a while. So with Gundabad, we were trying to like open it up a little bit more and also change how players move through the space. Instead of it being a very flat, expansive space, we went more with depth. Okay. Let's see. Why do you have to put two assets over one another and not create a new pillar instead? From Soft Snake regarding the Z fighting stuff. Well, sometimes it's not an intentional thing. Like sometimes it's a debris pile and a debris pile right next to each other, and they overlap a little bit, and it's not worth the time and art expense to kind of create those additional assets when it's just easier for us to either adjust placement or to do that one little property to to fix it up. Like we've done some asset consolidations here and there. I think Minas Tirith Midsummer is a prime example of where we've put a lot of work into trying to combine and consolidate pieces to help improve performance. But sometimes for little things like that, it's not worth the like custom one-off asset when just applying the depth buffering properties is sufficient. All right, I'm going to jump and jump. Don't mind me. So Mini XP Bounder asks, can the resolution of the landscape be boosted in general? Sometimes in certain areas there's too much angled or bumps in the land. So one of the things that we would love to do is increase the terrain fidelity and have greater control over the complexity of the terrain mesh. But that's a pretty big and expensive ask because it fundamentally changes how the engine renders the landscape. I think one of the things that we're often challenged with when we're building landscapes is how the far view of that landscape is represented. What it looks like in the distance, because that's a very programmatic simplification of that landscape, and often leads to the way that the polygons that make up that landscape often leads to how they look being not the way we would want them to, and causing things to be a little bit more jagged. For the near terrain, we certainly have some ability to kind of polish and adjust, doing things like edge flipping and whatnot and smoothing. And I think we're better at that in our more modern landscapes, but a lot of our older landscapes haven't had the landscape mesh massaging that the newer ones have. So is there any way to see the maps online or somewhere before the release of Gundabad? Do you mean like so Yoshir, do you mean the like map panel maps or like 3D fly-throughs of these spaces? I'm sure that I know there are plenty of wonderful YouTube content creators out there that have done some on-the-ground walkthroughs of many of the spaces here. And I'm sure that the actual map panel maps are also available out there as far as screenshots go. So let's go through. Is the map going to be more 3D to make things more navigatable? In Moria, you might end up 2 or 3 floors up or down from where you need to be. So that is not, so if you mean something more along the lines of like a a Dead Space or Metroid Prime style map, that's likely not going to happen. At least not in this iteration of the game, unless we do a major overhaul to how our map system works. I think we are more aware of the need for providing players access in spaces, even if we may not initially feel like they make sense for that space. So for example, going down rivers, it's important for us to make sure that we provide access points along rivers. Oh, that's what I wanted to go see down here. Provide access points at regular intervals along those rivers to get out. And I think we're more aware of those sorts of things now, and more just willing to do them. I think the original game, or originally the game, had a certain mentality as far as how players navigated the world, and the idea behind things like backtracking and trenches that only had one way out here and there was more acceptable. But I think now we're trying to have a better respect for player time and provide opportunities for players to kind of get where they need to go without feeling like they're being particularly hassled by that. So Soft Snake, I think you're attempting to take stuff out of context here. Certainly combining assets can be a quick process, but in the combining, they need to make sure that they don't accidentally build in overlaps, so that there's built-in Z-fighting. It's those sort of things that require additional polish beyond that, and because of that, it's often easier for us to just use multiple assets and then set the properties on them to define how they render. The work that was done in combining assets in Minas Tirith Midsummer, for example, was a couple of months worth of time from one of our artists to do that because of the complexity of that space. So Hiking of the Noldor says, I love how epic this area feels. It definitely makes the experience more immersive. You get an idea of why the dwarves want to reclaim it. And I think one of the things we did pretty successfully here in Gundabad that we didn't do quite as well on is a very distinct visual diversity between each of these areas. I think we maintained a very consistent look and feel throughout most of Moria, but part of the problem with that is oh, you're in the blue area, now you're in the red area, now you're in the mossy area, and it's a lot of similar looking structures that are used over and over again, and they just come across as slightly different colors. And I think with Gundabad, we've done a good job of trying to define the character of each of these spaces so that they look and feel unique in comparison to the other areas around them. We have the core Gundabad color profile for the buildings, that kind of yellowish gold color. That's our like underpinning behind it, with everything. But then we layer on top of that the character that makes each space distinct. You have places like here in Glooming Tarn where there's, I think the only real like dwarf structures you see are these lampposts, in comparison to Cloven Gap, which we're about to go to, where it's a very much more architectural space, but it's architectural in a way that's different from Madagard, in a way that's different from Deep's Grave, and from Stonejaws. So I'm going to grab myself another drink. So Obi asks, is there any plans to create something before the Amazon series will come out to drive in people who are hyped about it? maybe graphics update or something. Well, I can't speak too much about any specifics about what we might do. You know, we're pretty focused on what we're going to be doing for the next like 6 or so months now. I will say that we have in the past made some efforts to take advantage of Lord of the Rings adjacent properties that have happened. You know, I know we did the original Erebor instances around the time that the Hobbit movies first came out. So, like, I wouldn't find it surprising if we did something similar to help, you know, take advantage of a renewed interest in the IP. But what that would be, I can't say, and it's not ultimately my decision to make about what we would do anyways. So let's go through some more questions real quick. Is lands? Hold on. So is the landscape team aware that the Orthanc in Maine and Region 1 version of Isengard is duplicated and the two models are not perfectly overlapped? That's not something I'm aware of. Certainly, you know, again, if it looks odd and needs to be bugged, let's get it bugged and get it fixed. You know, I think we're at least as far as world stuff goes, we're pretty flexible in terms of how we can, you know, move off of something that we're working on to help address bugs as they come up. So certainly, if it's something that you can get good screenshots for, then by all means, like, let us know. So this feels like something that needs to be fixed. So I will mention this to some folks as well. Looks like the physics might have been reprocessed and the physics might have been turned off on it. But this is one of our major POI locations in Gundabad. And I believe we've got something over here. There it is. Part of the reason why I'm playing on a new character instead of the one that I've been playing before is that's been my playtest character, and I'm trying to level him up through the Gundabad experience, and I'm worried that if I do a stream with him and I'm running around and discovering stuff now, that's gonna throw off my my estimates on how much I'm making as far as XP and whatnot goes. So this is the entryway to a space that I think everyone's kind of heard about and seen a little bit about. We're not going to go in there quite yet because we'll hit some of the dungeon spaces first. But I'm gonna move us along a little bit so I don't have to swim way too much. So now we're in Cloven Gap. So way back at the beginning of the stream, someone had asked, or someone was talking about how Cloven Gap, they liked how it looked and they were wondering what it was inspired by. And the idea here behind Cloven Gap is, you know, there are instances in the world of these cave systems that have been open to the sky, and there's effectively, you know, jungles growing inside them. And while we didn't feel like a jungle was appropriate, we did think that something like that would be a really cool space to have here in Gundabad. You know, we dabbled a little bit with a garden space in the original Moria, but the idea here is like this is kind of the breadbasket of Gundabad. You know, it being open to the sky as it is, you know, provides an opportunity for flora and fauna that don't typically exist, but it's still got that high wall cave experience as you're going through it. And we've got a some sleeping cats. Let sleeping cats lie, I say. But yeah, the idea here was just to like see if we could do that like fanciful cave garden experience. All right, let's see. So I guess it looks like there's a conversation in here talking a little bit about Numenor and potentially going to the west. I think there is ample space here in Middle-earth that we have plenty of space to explore without needing to worry about going into areas where the rights are a little bit gray for us to play in. We've definitely got ideas and plans for where we want to go next, and we're starting to kind of build up those ideas and those plans now, post Gundabad. All right, I want to get up there. So one of the other fun pieces of kind of new tech that we've added, is something one of our tech artists was playing with, was just like new ways to enrich the engine. Is a snow shader. So normally what we would have to do whenever we were making an area that needed snow cover, we were planning for it to have snow cover, we'd basically have to make a whole new set of assets with snow on it. But now we have this new appearance modifier and shader that, allows us to apply kind of a layer of snow on top of assets without needing to make new assets. So it gives everything this kind of snow-dusted look, which is like really great, and honestly it gives us an opportunity for other applications. It lets us think about how we could use this in other ways, things like moss on trees, or leaves falling on rocks. Those sort of things become a bit more of a reality for us to do in this way, as opposed to the old way we used to do it by creating like whole new sets of things. And again, that's another thing that then frees up our artist time to start working on and creating new, unique stuff. And we know everyone loves new, unique stuff. All right, I'm gonna try to work my way up to the Welkin Lofts now. Who says anything about filling in the stable masters south of Gondor? Who said we were doing that? Belvinar, yep. Rust is another example of something we can do. Just another way, Rust, honestly, even dust. Like if we wanted to have a more like dusty appearance to things, that's certainly one of the things that this new shader could do for us. Well, our immediate plans, Drearspire is Drearspire is continuing to comment about the Stable Master map. Our immediate plans are not focused that far south. So welcome to the Welkin Lofts. This is one of the two exterior spaces with the Gundabad expansion pack. The idea here in the Welkin Lofts being that you're kind of like way up in the peaks of Mount Gundabad itself. You're just kind of on the backside of Gundabad. The designer who built this, like, he did such a great job, and we'll show it shortly, of kind of implying scale and implying space in here, and it's like the dedication to that, like that kind of far terrain work is really awesome. Let's make it daytime so we can see things a little bit better. So the kind of the idea behind the Welkin Lofts is it exists above Cloven Gaps to an extent. Get over these giant steps. So you have this amazing view of the valley below, and then you look down, and what you see down below you is this crevasse. And that crevasse is intended to be Welkin Lofts, or Cloven Gap, sorry. But yeah, I love this view so much. This is beautiful right here. And I think one of the things that we were really wanting to accomplish with both of these exterior spaces was to kind of give people a breath of fresh air, give them a break from the intense caviness. And I think one of the things too that people were legitimately concerned about when Gundabad was announced was that it was going to be like Moria, that it was going to be kind of caved in. It was going to be this gloomy, dark, oppressive space, and there wasn't really going to be a break from any of that for the players. And we went into Gundabad like really wanting to kind of fight against that, and do what we could to kind of give that like relief and diversity. And I think the interior spaces are interesting and diverse enough that they could do that on their own, and then things like Welkin Loft and Carbronock are kind of the icing on the cake. Let's see, head up here. I've spotted a lot of creatures attempting to move stealthily about. Probably wolves. So this is the Thingfold, another significant location for the story of the Legacy of Durin. And Stonejaws will probably be the last spot that we get to. I'm actually going to try to pick up the pace a little bit so that we can still have some time to get through the dungeon interiors as well, since we're about the halfway mark at this point. I'm going to have another drink. So we've got two more cool vistas that I want to take a look at with you all before we start making our way towards Carbronock. And I might be a little biased, considering I'm the one that made it, but I think Carbronock has the best sunset of any of the places in this expansion pack. Granted, there's only two places for there to be a visible sunset, but and then one of the things too that I'm liking about what we've done is, we've been very dwarf heavy in our storytelling for, the last probably 3 years now. And one of the things that I'm really happy about with each of those kind of major dwarf areas that we've been through is I feel like we've done pretty well at establishing a unique character for each of those areas. For between like, the Iron Hills and the Grey Mountains, the Stout Axe stuff, the Jelruka, I think we've been fairly successful at having a great diversity in the dwarves themselves. And I know that like after so many years, people are ready to move on to the next thing, but I feel like we're doing a really good job of capping this off, telling the story that we want to tell, and making it look really, really awesome in the process. And I'll admit, one of my favorite parts about the expansion pack is getting to play with Angmar stuff and play with it in a more play with it in a way that is a bit more modern. I think Angmar was, an old attempt, at building culture and cities and whatnot, but it was still very much couched in old school design methodology, where we were less concerned about how things fit in the world and more concerned about just things being present. Filling the space. Like, oh, that looks like it could use something there, but then not really making it feel like it being there was realistic to be there. And I think with Carbonok, it's an opportunity for us to, and with everything we've done with Gundabad itself, is to like build with intention. So this is the view out into the Elderslade. I think you can see the spire from one of the hubs out over there. And for those of you that dare to do it, feel free to jump off any ledges that you find. I've been trying to be as good as I can about making sure you're defeated when you do, because you know me, I love my defeat volumes. So before I run up to the last stop, I'll check through the chat again. Drearspire says, I like how each dwarf clan has distinct visual styles to their buildings. Even Professor Corey has picked up on it in his architecture-focused field trips. That was one of the things that we started doing more intentionally with the introduction of the Jelruka, and then as Nul Bazaar, we really just like dove deep onto the culture of each of the different dwarf clans and tried to really like hit those out of the park. So this is another one of the awesome views. I don't want to go down too far because I'm not sure how far I can go before I just fall to my death. Any new deeds for jumping off every ledge? I don't believe there is one in there yet. It's a stretch goal of mine, but I've got to get my plate clear of my next big project that I'm working on. A little thing about housing before I can turn my eye towards that. Hiking Noldor says, show us that big blue dragon scenario. So unfortunately, there are some places that I am not going to be taking us on this tour for the purposes of keeping the story secret. I will say that there is a fairly substantial landscape area, a couple of them, that we're not going to be touring through that are part of the story that I'm not gonna bring us there for fear of spoilers. So those will be things that you'll have to visit and experience as you play. So we'll So we'll skip ahead a little bit so that I don't have to run all the way back up through the Welkin Lofts. So we'll be here at Felgat. This is our entry point into Carbronach. And you can see directly ahead the Drearspire. And then to my right, you can see the Witch Gate starting to appear. It was actually a lot of fun taking the Angmarum assets and the Dwarf assets and kind of smashing them together. So Carbronach is one of the first areas that was built using a new overland, a new landscape development process, using tools called World Machine to help us construct a realistic-looking terrain, and then bringing that here into our tools in a kind of streamlined manner. Way back years ago, we did have a process by which we could kind of sculpt landscape by using different tools and import them into our engine. But unfortunately, the tools that were kind of our intermediary tools were not that great, and this method only worked with certain versions of certain tools. So recently, we were given the ability to effectively use Photoshop to sculpt our landscape. So any system that we can use to produce a height map that will export a grayscale image of that height map, we can then bring into our tools, which is great for us. I think the iteration time for me on the landscape here was very quick in comparison to many of the other landscapes that we've hand sculpted. So this gives us a great opportunity to kind of like build the landscape and then spend more time on the details of it, as opposed to having the sculpting of it kind of really compete with things like the painting and the scene usage. So our first stop is kind of one of the promised places, something that we hinted at for a while, that we were going to do eventually, and is now part of kind of connecting the various parts of our world together. We have the connection between Eriador and Rovanion through Moria. We have it in the Misty Mountains and Vales of Anduin. And now we have, hold on, we'll look at the view when we come back. But now we have the ability to travel from Angmar to Carbronach, to Rovanion, when it loads. If it loads. I may have to reboot the client. We'll see if it keeps me on here. I may have made the server angry. So the connection point is open to any level, though low levels coming into this area will likely get beat down pretty harshly. So I may need to restart my client, it looks like. So hold on 1 second while I do that. So we don't have any specific plans for more chicken play, though. As long as as long as the as long as there's no restriction on the doors, I don't see why a chicken couldn't get into Gundabad via this pass in Angmar. I mean, you could be the Chicken King of Angmar. So Vroom Fondle says, now that Stoneheight has been made an open landscape area, has any thought been put into making it a housing area? I would love more apartment-style housing in Lotro. So that's one of the things that I would... Let me set my... one of the things that I would love to introduce at some point is like apartment-style housing, and I had actually roughed in a space with that intention in Breland when I did the Breland revamps for the Legendary server launch. I think with anything housing, we need to balance, like when we release things, what our aspirational target is for those kinds of things. Like Rohan was very much a we want to sell you living on the plains. We want to sell you living on the foothills. Belphalis has the you're living in kind of like a Mediterranean island kind of feel in Gondor. Our next neighborhood has a very specific aspirational target that we're aiming for. Apartments are a little bit of a harder sell, at least in terms of like big splashiness, but it's certainly something that we talk about and is an aspect of the system that I think would be good to add at some point. There we go. So the reaches of Carbronach. So I have, regarding housing, I do have like a big list of features and functionality that I would love to have, and it's a matter of, as we get time to do it. We always have these big ticket items that we're working on, legendary item system, brawler, performance improvements, those sorts of things that, take up our engineering time. And it's a matter of figuring out which of these requests make sense to have happen when, and who has the time to work on them. It's like with anything, it's like saying, oh, we want more landscape. Okay, who has time to work on the landscape? We want more quests. Who has time to work on more quests? It's the same sort of thing for engineering as well. We kind of all have our running plate of things that we want to get done, and it's just a matter of time. And there's never enough time. I mean, that's one of the fun things about building a game that's as big as this is while there's a lot to do, there's also a lot where you're just like, I'll do that someday, and you never have a shortage of things just waiting for you to jump on and to get going on. Yes, so and I will have more details to talk about with new housing stuff soonish. We want to get through Gundabad before we really talk too much about it. But the next the next neighborhood will have a kinship house. It will have deluxe and standard houses. So it'll be more like Belphalis, though not as many houses as Belphalis. We are in the Drearspire right now. This is using all these fun Angmarum assets. As I'm running through it, I feel like I should probably hit it with a Deco Pass. That might be a good, week before launch polish thing for me. Well, while we're here, let's see if I can get in. I'm not sure if the door has any usage restrictions. There we go. So this is the interior of the Drearspire. We've talked a bit about, new assets and old assets and whatnot. One of the things that I did in this space is we had, way back when, made a dungeon set for the Angmarim. It had a very kind of like sci-fi-ish look and feel to it, but we brought it in and we polished up a little bit to kind of give it its heyday here in the Gundabad expansion pack. Gilder, yes, I am in the office. This was not the intention. Unfortunately, we had some severe weather come through, and my house has been without power since 4:30 this morning. So this was the backup plan. This was how we were gonna do the stream, since I couldn't do it from my very, very dark and unpowered basement. And like I mentioned back at the beginning of the stream, like, this is the first time that I've spent any substantial amount of time in the office since March 2020. It's been a while. It's a little weird too. You walk in here and people still have their desks and their things set up here. Photos, books, decorations, and whatnot. But it's just like, there's kind of a what was that town in Virginia? Was it not Roanoke? Was it Roanoke? Where just like everyone disappeared, and that's kind of the feel that this space has right now. Is just like everyone just left. Don't know where they are. They just left. So these are the upper levels of the Drearspire. Kind of the idea here was each section was kind of meant to represent a sort of different faction within the forces that are, claiming ownership over the tower. So our first stop here is a very Angmarim centric, kind of gross sewer garden kind of thing going on. And then as we work our way up to the next level, it's more of the industrial, waterworks and pipes everywhere kind of thing. And I think I may have, I don't remember, now I remember. We did some internal reviews where I was finding places that I shouldn't be able to get to. You'd think I would build better. So I need to do a physics pass on this space before it goes live. And then we come up here to the scholarly section. They're doing such a good job of taking care of all of their books. It's things like that. It's amazing how much mileage you can get out of things like book piles and debris piles, and how just scattering a few of them around can make a space feel, more full than it actually really is. Make it feel more detailed than it really is. So Cold Linus says, nice bear helmet. Well, thank you. I was trying to come up. I was hoping to have more brawler stuff to dress up in, but I know we're still waiting on some of the art for that. So I decided to go with this outfit instead. So now we're at kind of one of the upper tiers of it. Open to the sky. Ceiling broke out. Travel. There we go. So we'll take a quick look. So those stairs do not look OSHA approved. Yeah, I mean, I feel like Angmarum are the kind of people that are like, they'll tell you to tough it up if you fall down a flight of stairs. So K-Wolf says the variety in landscape exteriors and interiors are much more than I expected. It's a huge expansion. I mean, we've been putting a lot of work into it. I think, like I said earlier, we've been, at least the world team has been working on the landscapes for, over a year now. The content team has been, putting a ton of work into it. We're hoping that it can feel big, without it being prohibitively large for us to create. And I think we've managed that pretty well. So we have the Witch Gate up here. This was a fun mashup of Angmarum and dwarf architecture, which I think works really, really well together. So why does the light look like it's slowly pulsing on your character but not in the space? So my character right now is cloaked, so that I'm not getting aggro from everything as I run around, and that's what the effect looks like on me. It's just a slow red pulse. So don't worry about that. That's not anything. So where is that furry cloak from? So I'm wearing the Swift Camel of the Maw, and I'm wearing, where's my cloak? I'm wearing the Cloak of Abnuju. I believe the cloak is from the Azlanul's Bazaar release, I think. Is Carbonok how Angmar would look if it was built in 2021 from Soft Snake? I think there are definitely, if I were to be able to go through level Angmar and rebuild it up, there are definitely aspects of what I've built here that I would carry over into that. I mean, I honestly, one of my dreams would be to remake Carndum and Urgarth, because I think we could do what we wanted to accomplish in those spaces now, as opposed to what we actually achieved back then. I think Carndum wanted to feel like a city, but it was still very theme park in its style and presentation. So we weren't able to. We didn't. I don't think we succeeded at the city feel quite as much as I think we could have. So Iwanar says maybe there will be a revamp of Angmar once they have some time. So Angmar already got a little bit of love, though most of that attention was paid more towards the earlier sections of it. The Ram Duath, for example, I overhauled pretty significantly, and added a lot to it, because it didn't have a lot going on for it. I think the other areas of Angmar had enough character that while they may not have been up to modern standards, I think their character kind of stood out pretty strongly on their own. Carndum did get some changes. I know there were some changes that I made just to kind of mix things up a little bit for people that like to run the instances and were expecting certain walkways to be present and weren't, and would result in people falling into Acid Doom, which I had a lot of fun watching myself. I thought that was a lot of fun to observe. go up through. One of the things that we tried to really get a little bit more mileage out of too was our giant sets, because we do have giants supported as a creature type and as a content theme, both in Carbonok and Welkenlofts, but we don't really have a set of assets for them that's very extensive. So it was tricky trying to make an extensive giant settlement with so few assets. So Softsteak says the only thing in Angmar missing is a little bit of snow. There were actually originally planned to be parts of Angmar more towards the west that were supposed to be like snowy mountain wastelands. But when we kind of stepped back and reevaluated what we wanted out of Angmar, we kind of ended up cutting that area altogether. I think there's some remnants of it still in game data here and there. Certainly the landscaping sort of exists still, but Drearspire says, I love these stairs, proper giant-sized stairs. Yes, that is what I wanted to do. I was pretty okay with forcing players to have to jump up the stairs, because it always, like, I didn't want to build ramps. I wanted to build stairs, and it felt right to build them that way. So Drearspire says about the Giants structures, they're a little bit refined, right? Less blocky. I think they got a little bit of extra bevel added to them, and the texture got revamped, but that was about it. So let's see if I can 0.75. Well, it's a cloudy day here on this server, so we won't be able to see the sunset here quite as easily. But rest assured, it is a great sunset. So that oh, sorry, that doesn't wrap it up. We have one more place to go. Still one more area to take a look at, and then we'll jump into the dungeon stuff. Sorry, I was getting ahead of myself. You know, functionally, Gundabad's landscape is all one big loop. You know, you enter in Madagard, and then you can kind of go to your left or your right, and eventually loop your way back around. Depending, you know, you'll have to come outside to go to Carbonok and to go to Welkenlofts, but you'll be able to kind of loop around that way. The idea being that the content kind of goes around the mountain. So we'll go up here into the Witch Gate. So question from Marcos Fomaz. Good morning from Australia. My question is, why do so many pathways in the game appear to have no normal maps? Well, some do and some don't. It depends on the structure and the age of them. Some very, very, very old terrain textures, for example, don't have normal maps at all. And you know, as we come across those issues, we go through and we'll fix them. There's that sunset, and we'll take care of them. Some of them do have normal maps, but the lighting situation is not particularly conducive to normal maps. Particularly some of the tricks that we do for having a lot of light influences on landscape can sometimes flatten out the lighting on the terrain. So it's kind of the cost benefit, you know, weighing of like, do we want to have a really, really cool lighting setup for this given area, or do we want to have the normal maps pop a little bit more? I also think that as part of the new lighting system that went in, you know, back at the beginning, towards the beginning of the year, the per pixel lighting attenuation, when you do come across assets that don't have a normal map or don't have something that is does not have a very strong normal map, it's a bit more obvious. I think another thing too that we often run across is sometimes we don't want certain terrain types to have normal maps. We want things to be a little bit more subtle. So that can lead to textures being a little jarring if they end up being used up against each other in certain ways. Let's see, can I jump over? Oh, I can't jump over. I think Iceman prevented me from doing that. So, any teas for post-Gundabad region plans? So, we do have plans. Our next area is going to be more in scale, more in scope and scale of the Wildwood, and it is currently in production. So that's the tease. So we'll head back out here. So yeah, like we really enjoyed building the Wildwood. Like for me, it was a little like side pet project that I just kind of, after we were done with Minas Morgul, I had time to, you know, just tinker, and Wildwood was the result of that tinkering. And I think both our interests in trying to fill out the world more, and the player feedback and response to it was significant enough on both fronts that we kind of convinced ourselves that yeah, there's room and space for us to do these kinds of things. There's interest from the players in doing these kinds of things. There's interest in introducing new lower level content, more avenues, more opportunities for alt leveling, so that you're not on that same content track all the time. So it's something that we're all really interested in and excited about doing. So this area here, there are a number of tombs scattered throughout Stonejaws, which is the area we're in right now, that are switch state camps. So all of these tombs can, at any point, again, another thing that we kind of took away from the Wildwood, at any point when these camps load up, they can be a completely different set of enemies. So that camp right there, for example, was loaded out with dwarf whites. We run over here, and this may or may not be hooked up yet. So this one isn't hooked up yet. But there are other ones in the area that we can hopefully go check out. Will be something different with its own unique sets of deco and whatnot as well. So we'll go. So that rolled dwarf white again. I may be getting a little lost. This is not an area that I am super familiar with. Here we go. Yeah, so like we saw a couple of these tombs that had dwarf whites in them. This one has Angmarum cultists in it. I think the one across the way also had Angmarum cultists in it. Yep. But the way these camps work out is whenever they load up, they have a chance to randomly roll a different setup. So, for example, now this is a Kurgrim camp, but you could come here at another point and it would be dwarf whites, or it could be Angmarum. So this is like one of the things that I personally really enjoyed from the Wildwood, that we tried to bring in here in a similar fashion. We'll run back down the hill and get one last look at Stone Jaws before we start diving into our dungeon spaces. See, while I'm running, let's take a look at some of these only other comments. Gilder says, the only thing I don't like about Wildwood is that it's level 45. There's already so much at that range. It would have been better at 25 to naturally extend to Trestle Bridge. Yeah, and I think that's something that we're like, originally I was thinking it could be a level 50 area. We brought it back down from level 45 just because we were kind of looking at what's out there for level 45s. You know, it felt like level, you know, up to 30 was fairly well represented, and we didn't want to really distract too much from the core experience of those levels, particularly for new players if they feel like they're getting pulled in too many directions. Because it already can be tricky once you hit level 20. You're like, all right, do I want to go to Lone Lands or North Downs or parts of the Troll Shaws? Like, there are vectors kind of like popping up all over the place trying to pull you around, and one more at that level might not have been as successful. So we'll run back down here. So we are almost back in Madagard now. I love these little pools of water. These things are great. They look nice, and they're a good like change in color, I think, from the rest of the space, so that they stand out pretty well. So Bell Navarre says that I like the camp switching so long as it doesn't become a problem for deeming. So the intent with these is, I believe, most of the targets in there are more of a, you know, you're aiming at a generic super group of enemies as opposed to a specific creature type. I'd have to take a look at it more specifically to know, but I believe that's the direction those deeds went. Alright, so we have toured Gundabad. We started in Madagard, and we have returned to Madagard. And now it's time for us to start going through some of these dungeon spaces, right? Now, there is a lot, and I can't say that we'll be able to get through all of them, but we'll take a look at some of them as we go. We're going to start out super simple. We're going to go right into a little, you know, goblin house. This is in Deepsgrave. This little goblin just has his own little apartment here. He's just chilling out. He's like, hey, dwarves can have it in Thorn's Hall. Why can't I have one? It doesn't take care of it very well, though. So it's the filthy goblin den. We've already been into the Allegiance Hall. We do have a bunch of mission spaces. The mission spaces are always fun, too, because outside of just like a general high-level concept for the mission, we can really just kind of do whatever. You know, I think this place was kind of meant to be like a cave claw kind of cave with some crystals in it, but nothing really too specific. So we were able to just kind of freeform it, which is fun. You know, you can build these like quick 5-10 minute dungeons and feel like you've like built something interesting. Now, a lot of these mission spaces are not available on landscape. It's stuff we've talked about doing for all of these, is having landscape entrance. Though I think if we were to do that, we would want them to have like some substance to them as well, which is typically why we don't, because we don't have a content planned for what like the public version of these spaces would be. So have you had a play with player themselves not emitting any light? I'm not sure what that means. Some areas do have player key lights, some don't have player key lights, and then there's also the client ambient boost, which players can use to adjust up and down the light sources. And my client may have crashed again, so I may need to restart that. Let's do that. I'll crack open my next drink. So Imanar says, one thing people have requested for a long time is scaling for the landscape. We have instances that scale to match player level. How about scaling players to match the landscape? It would be very cool to be able to be a level 50-ish again to replay specific regions. So that is something that I explored briefly for the Wildwood, actually. Kind of looking at what was done for the Etten Moors and seeing if there was a way that we could apply that to Wildwood in order to make it relevant for everyone, not just relevant to people of a certain level. Because one of the big pushes that we had this year through a lot of our content is making sure that each major release we had included something in it that most everyone could participate in. That was largely as part of the. Let me close this. What did I get for my Hobbit gift? I got Mark Acquisition. Mostly that was done as part of the mission system, allowing level 20s and greater to kind of experience Elderslade, experience Gundabad, experience Wildwood, without having to be the level necessary to get into that space. I think that if we had if what was done in the Etten Moors was given more love and attention, I think landscape scaling could be a bit more viable. But right now, the systems and tools we have really aren't great for it. Not to say that it's not something that we think about. We won't. Not to say that we are never going to think about it again, but I think for right now, it's not really like what we're aiming towards, or the best way to do it. Like for when I was thinking about it for Wildwood, there was just all of these like questions about like, okay, so what happens when you cross back and forth between the different, between a scaling area and a non-scaling area? What happens to your gear? What happens to the player? Does the player relog? Does the player get stuck at a certain level? A lot of those things where it's just so many big unknowns that the idea of implementing it was a bit daunting and made it that much easier to just be like, we'll figure this out later. Pop-up quests in the storyline. So Arabani says there are two things I really dislike about Wildwood: pop-up quests and inconsistency in storylines. So I'm guessing you mean pop-up quests by like you walk into a camp and you'll get the quests. I think everyone has different tolerances for that kind of thing. I think from a efficiency of questing perspective, that pop-up quests are really, really useful, and they're good for engaging explorer types. But I can certainly see the appeal of like wanting to go to a quest hub and get all your quests there, and not having to worry about whether or not you might have missed something while exploring. Okay, so continuing discussion about that. So B414 says, if you were to pass through a zone portal to get to South Farthing, it would be a natural place to do level scaling. I think why level scaling works for the Etten Moors is because it is a teleport, because that's a very clear like boundary. I would be hesitant to do anything of the scale of something like the South Farthing when we have room for it, as a teleport, unless it was going to be something that is like drastically and shockingly different. So, for example, and this is not saying this is what we are going to do or what we would be doing, but if it was you know, the South Farthing was the Scouring of the Shire version of the Shire, then a teleport might be appropriate. But if it's the South Farthing is something that's intended to be like part of the landscape, you know, part of the contiguous landscape, I wouldn't teleport if we didn't need to. So none of these spaces you'll notice are populated at the moment. That's because these are all mission spaces. They'll be populated. If I was in here during the mission itself, this would be loaded up with things. But because these are missions, right now we're just going through the shell and looking at the pretty. Some more pretty than others. Let's see if there's any other questions. Is your pet project still to fill in the lands between Erdluin and the Shire? I would love to do that. I hope to do that at some point during my tenure here. It's just a matter of, you know, if we have the time for it, when we have the time for it, and if it makes sense to go in that direction. Certainly things like the Wildwood have really opened up our ability to do those sorts of things. So who knows? I'd love to do it. Maybe I'll get to someday. A lot of these spaces were fun to build, just getting the high level cue from a content designer and just going with it. So again, we're bringing in, this is the Angmarum style dungeon pieces that have kind of gotten resuscitated for this expansion pack, and I think there's a lot of interesting shapes and whatnot that we can make with them. They're not quite the same sort of style that we typically have our dungeon pieces in, which make them a little tricky to use sometimes, but for fairly straightforward spaces that don't have a lot of physical complexity to them, I think they're great additions. And we have one of our friends here. Just wave. MVP is probably finding more Z fighting bugs for me to fix. So Yo asked, did I get my Bjorning ready for Gundabad? Unfortunately, my Bjorning will not be level capped before Gundabad, and I totally blame Deathloop and Back for Blood on that. So this Grodbog hive was built prior to having the that asset set that I used to build the hive in Madagard. So it's very, like, the textures are slightly different. Some of them are a little bit more pink because that's the original Moria appearance for them. So there's like a little bit of like difference and slight trivia there. So what I noticed around last round of beta is that Lore Master Pets have a lot of pathing issues in the new missions. So some spaces have not had good path maps generated in them for a while. We usually have an automated task that will generate those for us, and unfortunately, earlier in the fall when we were doing some work on upgrading our build systems, those processes were turned off in the interest of just like testing in memory. Those processes are now on again, and we're hoping to like catch any of the loose ends that we might have missed. If there are areas that have particularly egregious pathing issues, please report them, and we can take a look at them and see if we either need to simplify the space or if there are other larger issues at play that are making pathing challenging in those spaces. Oops, I got a cloak here. So this is a public space. This is in Carbonok, another one of the public dungeon spaces full of wights and Angmarum and fell spirits. I'm really happy with how the ambiance in this space turned out. Kind of the fog and the purple fog mixed with the mist all over the place. It feels really kind of disturbing, like an uncomfortable place to be. Let's see if there are any other questions real quick. Yeah, so the Ionar had said that it looks like the Barrows in Breland should be. I think there is a lot that we've done with this expansion pack that is like, if we ever went back to redo an old area, this is how it should look. Even like running around in a place like this and then thinking about some of the caves that are in Breland itself, some of like the Brigand Cave or the Waterfall Cave from the Epic Story. Like running through these spaces, this is how we should like do it up. It's hard finding the time to like go through and do that work because there's a lot of dungeon spaces. But it is very much like we kind of look back and go, oh well, we can do this better, and then try to do that better. Yeah, and I think a lot of it comes down to those like little level of detail things that we put on the different debris piles and other small, almost seemingly inconsequential deco pieces that we use to build these spaces that just help them feel a little bit more, detailed. So this space is affectionately called Superforge 2.0, kind of taking a look at the large forge of Moria and the Way of Smiths, and thinking about how we built that space and what we can do to make it better in terms of gameplay. I think one of the challenges with the Way of Smith space is it was a very spread out space, and you often would spend a lot of time running back and forth. The idea here being is kind of emulating a similar kind of experience, but having it be more focused and centralized so that you're not feeling like you're running minutes at a time to get to a certain area. I can't say as I know specifically the content that's going into this, only just talking about the high-level concept and the design approach. We'll do a quick tour through so I was not able to get through everything, but before going out, I did want to, at the very least, get through 2 more interiors, and then we'll call it. A lot of people have already seen and explored through the Den of Pugla. There we go. So this was a fun place to build. It's been affectionately called Hypnotoad for various reasons. And then this is where where Pugla himself resides. Very fun space to play, to make, and to play around in. But as you've seen through the fight, it sends you into various areas, kind of meant to be reminiscent of your game experiences. So it sends you to a battle-torn Gondorian ruins. And every one of these spaces does have a little bit of that like psychedelic plant stuff kind of growing into it, along with the trippy lighting effects. My favorite of the spaces is this one here, this just wasteland. I don't think we've ever really had something that looks like this before, and so having building out this kind of space just felt really like interesting to me. And then we've got the crazy sky going on too, which is always fun. We've got the Drowned Tavern, which may be familiar to some people. I think I had patterned this after. What one was this patterned after? There was a tavern that this was patterned after, and now I don't remember. But if you remember the pattern and you remember the tavern and you go in here, you will see these mounds that are representative of the NPCs that were sitting in the space. Torture Chamber is not as interesting, but still has a lot going on for it. It's this very dark Mordor experience with just the gross plant stuff everywhere. Like, we got a lot of mileage out of that gross plant stuff. That I might need to fix. And then we've got the space farm, which was also a fun kind of space. Between this and the Halls of Memory, like, I props to the content folks for giving me fun spaces to build that we don't, of the kind that we don't typically see in Lord of the Rings. I was watching one of the streamers do this, and the amount of anxiety he was having about getting knocked off the edge in this particular fight was entertaining. go through these questions real quick before we go through this last one. Anyone keep notes on all the stuff we have seen that scenario needs to fix? I'm keeping some mental notes. So this was one of the fun places to build too, was the Waterworks, and just like how out there. And it's actually kind of disorienting moving the camera around while on this like Starfield water trough. All right, and then we've got one last place to go. Let me find the location for it, and then we'll call it a night. This is where we want to go. So this last place is a portion of, in Stonejaws, the Shakujat throne room. Just another fun like mix of Angmarum and dwarf assets, which do a really good job of evoking that kind of Isengard vibe without being Isengard specifically. We have a new throne room for this, and players are able to get outside, or will be able to get outside. I'm not sure if that's been hooked up yet. It's not available in this version of the space, but other versions, yes. So yeah, that is our stroll through Gundabad. Yeah, so that was Gundabad. There's a lot of work from our team. Like, we were super excited to be doing all of this. It's kind of the culmination of the story that we've been telling. Even though we had that little bit of detour back into Minas Morgul, it's still tied into everything that we were building towards with this expansion pack. For those of you that love the dwarf stuff, like, I think you're going to really be happy with the landscape and with the adventures that you're going to have in here. For those that are ready for the next thing, like, I hope you find a really enjoyable experience in Gundabad, and you just start thinking on where to go next, where you think you want to go next. We've got ideas about where we want to go next, and hopefully those ideas are exciting to you when we start talking about them. So the next things that we have to talk about, as far as the casual stroll goes, we do have a couple of regions left in Eriador before we'll probably hit Moria after we get done with all of Eriador. But one of the things I would like to do, probably for the next casual stroll, is to do a casual stroll through housing. I don't think we've really spent much, if any, time in any of the neighborhoods. So there's such a critical social aspect of the game that it felt like we should dedicate a stream to those. And who knows, some new things may be discussed in that stream as well. So anyways, thank you everyone for attending and for joining me through this stroll of Gundabad. For those of you that have had the opportunity to play on Bullroar, thank you for all of your feedback and for the time that you have spent in playing in that space. Like, I know sometimes it's hard to see that we're listening, but all of that feedback is all stuff that we have been looking at, going over, and doing what we can to address things. For those of you that have pre-ordered Gundabad, I hope you're enjoying the brawler. And those of you that have logged in recently to play with the legendary item system and start getting used to that system, I hope you're enjoying that as well. Until next stream, everyone have a great week and continue weeks until then. And hopefully you'll continue joining in on all the other streamers that are here, and as we ramp up on our charity efforts through the holiday season with Cordovan, you joined in on that as well. Anyways, thank you everyone, and have a good afternoon. It was great spending this time with you all. And yeah, hopefully it stops raining here.